I'm not gonna lie, I'm kind of nervous to do this video because I'm exposing some of my less than perfect writing on the internet, but I just find these videos so helpful, so we're just gonna do it. Hi, my name is Josie and welcome back to my writing channel. And today we are going to be line editing the first chapter of my mountaineering revenge thriller novel. And this is going to be an exercise in many different parts. So my goal with all of this is to improve my line editing skills because I view that as one of my weakest aspects as a writer. So what we're going to do today is I'm going to show you the first kind of scene of chapter 1. We're going to go through it as is. I'm going to do what I would do for a line level pass. But that's when things are going to get really interesting because we are going to try and mimic the writing of published authors and just get a feel for what it's like to write in a different style. I'm hoping that that can help me with my own writing just by forcing myself to get out of my own comfort zone. While in this video, I'm going to be copying the writing style of these authors as best as I can. I don't know how successful I'm going to actually be. The point is not to change my writing style to match theirs. The point is just to try something new. So I picked 3 thriller authors, and the first one is Wabgi Shig Rice with I'm going to be using Moon of the Crested Snow. This is kind of a slow burn survival thriller. Next is Gillian Flynn with Sharp Objects, also known for Gone Girl. And then last, we're going to be doing Karen Slaughter. I've read this one before, just pieces of her. She has like a ton of books. So without further ado, let's get started with jumping into chapter 1. We just got to do it before I overthink things too much. Chapter 1. Beth couldn't escape the gaze of the small boy with rosy cheeks and tight blonde curls. As soon as the restaurant's thick cedar door swung shut behind Beth, the boy's watery blue eyes tracked her. One of his chubby hands clutched at the shivering purple dress of his mother. She spoke in a low voice with the maitre d'. The restaurant was even more pretentious than it appeared in Beth's magazine, likely about to charge way too much money for way too small of portions. The floor-to-ceiling windows allowed a panoramic view of the twinkling city bathed in the fading sun's orange glow. A crystal chandelier hanging far above Beth's head scattered rainbows of light across the minimally decorated space. Those glistening child eyes continued to stare. Beth crossed her arms and tried to pick out her neighborhood in the city below, but she couldn't escape the sticky scrutiny. She had not booked a table at one of the most expensive restaurants in the city to be stared at. If she wanted a stranger to gawk at her, she would take public transportation. It was the violating gaze of gawking strangers that had forced her public scrutiny to a minimum since her accident. The child's mother, a waif-thin woman with glossy hair pinned to her head like a beehive, draped a pale arm on the podium as the maitre d' scurried off to do her bidding. She gazed down at her manicured nails, oblivious of her little demon's behavior, or perhaps uncaring. Beth caught the boy's gaze and held it. She let her mouth go slack and her eyes cross. She staggered forward. The boy shrieked and dove behind his mother's skirt. The woman's gaze swept across the waiting room, half-heartedly searching for the source of her offspring's distress. Her darkly painted lips puckered when her eyes landed on Beth. What did... The rest of her sentence fell away because her eyes locked onto the space between the bottom of Beth's pantsuit and the floor. The small blonde head peeked past the woman's knee. Beth ignored the reddening of her cheeks, wishing she had done nothing at all. The woman couldn't complete her sentence. She stared as intent as her son's. Her stare as intent as her son's. Don't worry about it, Beth said. The woman slowly regained her composure, though her eyes continued to stray back to Beth's foot. Or, well, lack thereof. Really, I apologize. Kids, you know. He has a nanny. She's supposed to be teaching him manners, but... It's fine, Beth said. The woman bit her lip. If you don't mind me asking, how did you... A year ago, a question like that would have brought Beth to tears. 3 months ago, this situation would provoke her to rage until her lungs burned. But there were more important things to be accomplished tonight. Beth touched the ring that hung between her collarbones before answering. A climbing accident. The woman grimaced, her skin pulling taut over her sharp features. That's terrible. I fell 20 meters. Oh, goodness. Into a crevasse. The woman swallowed hard. But I was wearing a backpack, so I wedged into the ice. If I had been any skinnier, I probably would have fallen another 50 meters. Cracked my skull open, bled out. That's lucky. The woman's curt intonation made it clear that she wanted the conversation to end, but why was it that others always got to decide when they had enough? So I decided to start the story here because Beth is going to this restaurant where she's going to be meeting people that really set off the start of the story. And this meeting is really important, but I didn't want to jump straight into the meeting because I kind of wanted to give more context on her, kind of give a bit more setting, so that way when you see her in that meeting, in that situation, you know a little bit more where she's coming from. So I started with this boy seeing her because for Beth, you know, she had this horrible climbing accident. She lost her foot and she has been kind of in seclusion ever since. So I thought it was really important to bring up the idea of being watched, of being scrutinized, because that's something that she is highly aware of. The main things I want to keep with this passage is the idea of this boy watching her, the same as with the mother, you know, trying to be like, oh, I'm so sorry, but at the same time also pushy, also wanting to know more information than a stranger really should. I want to keep those aspects, but I feel like we need to have more emotion here because this is the first time Beth has escaped her home, not escaped, but left her home in a really long time. So I think we need to play up the nervousness at being, you know, around other people, maybe being a little bit more awkward because it's been a long time since she's been like in a social situation having to talk to people. And I was also thinking of trying to mimic a bit more the frustration that she has because I really want to highlight her internal conflict here. I think I have an idea of how I want to organize this to give more of an emotional climax to it. So I'm going to do that and then we'll come back and I'll show you what I've done. I have just gone through the section. Not that much has changed, like structurally, like it's very much the same, but I really feel like when you're line editing, these small differences of like how you tweak certain words, how you tweak the order of stuff can have a much bigger impact. So let's go back through it and you can decide for yourself whether you think that this is an improvement. So I kept the beginning the same. So we have chapter 1, little boy with rosy cheeks and tight blonde curls tracked Beth from across the front of house. So we have the boy watching Beth. But in this version, I gave a bit more detail as to where he was right off the bat to try and have a better idea of like where everyone's positioned, because I don't want just all these people floating in space. I want to try and like establish some sort of setting. But I used words like tracked and peered to almost have it seem, you know, like he's watching, kind of add maybe more of like an animalistic feel of like him watching Beth, like her feeling like she's being tracked by someone. And then I went into the description of the location. So she averted her attention to the expansive windows, describing the location as I did before. I just put this sentence at the end because I feel like it worked better after kind of describing, oh, look how beautiful it is. Oh, but Beth doesn't view it as beautiful. She views it as pretentious, and kind of, you know, building that in a bit more. And then comes kind of more of the new stuff. So in this one, instead of the child kind of always being by his mother, the child is going to Beth. So the child escaped his mother's skirt and edged towards Beth. He stumbled on his awkward toddler legs. His mother, a waif thin woman, so this is a lot of the description from before. She's not really paying attention to her child. There was no one to divert the child. Beth rooted through her bag. Surely she could find a long forgotten mint or shiny penny to offer the boy. She came up empty-handed, so kind of showing a little bit of her desperation of her like, I don't know what to do in this situation. The child stumbled to a stop within arm's reach. He blinked. Beth debated abandoning months of planning and leaving the restaurant. So this is an addition I made because I feel like you don't really know why she's there, right? Like in that original, she's just there, she's having this weird interaction. But this is a bit more of a clue as to what's happening next. And I think I'm going to end this chapter with more of a leave off of like, she's nervous, especially for her meeting, and maybe that's why it's bleeding into this. But what is she anticipating? And kind of having that maybe be as the cliffhanger for chapter 1. So I just want to give this first hint here. So she wasn't entirely sure what she anticipated him doing, but the child giggled, revealing a gummy smile. Warmth blossomed in Beth's chest. She could not help but return a smile. She crouched down, her prosthetic squeaking. And so in this moment, you're kind of having her worried, and then the child giggling, kind of pulling her out of this, and this reaction of being happy or of like, surprise, but quickly turning sour because her prosthetic squeaked and then the giggles cut off. The boy stared into the space between the bottom of Beth's pantsuit and the floor. He stumbled back, eyes rounding as a wail built up in his chest. Beth could only watch, heart sinking as the boy scrambled to hide behind his mother. So now we're kind of going very much back into what was in the original. So that was kind of the new section that I wrote. So the woman says, "What did?" The rest of her sentence fell away because she noticed what her son had. Because the description that was here before, I think I used it for the child, like noticing the space up here, noticing the space between the bottom of the pantsuit and the floor was what was here before. So because I moved that, I had to rearrange. And then, yeah, it's mostly the same, this section, as this conversation starts. Beth ignored the reddening of her cheeks and rose to stand. The woman cleared her throat, awkward. "Don't worry about it," Beth said. The woman slowly regained her composure, though her eyes continued to stray back to Beth's foot, or, well, lack thereof, trying to give excuses as to why the child's behaving that way. "It's fine," Beth said. And then, so what I did here was I'm kind of trying to be a bit more obvious about Beth's feelings. So we have a similar, I've just kind of rearranged and put different thoughts into this one paragraph from before. So a year ago, a question like that would have brought Beth to tears. 3 months ago, she would have yelled and raged, but not tonight. So again, a hint that tonight something's happening. It's special for a specific reason, not when there were more important things to be accomplished and giving these strangers any more of her energy. Beth touched the ring that hung between her collarbones before answering, "A climbing accident." The woman grimaced, her skin pulling tight. "That's terrible." And then Beth, despite, trying to say, "Not tonight," this cool rage stirred in the depths of Beth's gut at the woman's false niceties, especially as the woman turned back to face the host stand. And I really liked adding this sentence because it makes it feel like the woman is clearly trying to abandon the conversation. And so I feel like that just adds a little bit extra, so that way when Beth continues it, it's a bit more obvious that that's what's going on. So as you can see, like when I do these line edits, there's not a lot changing necessarily. Like a lot of this is the same as what was in that first draft that I showed you, or I guess it was like the second draft of my book. But that earlier version, like not that much has changed, but I at least feel like when I'm reading it, that it's a bit more intentional. I'd be interested to hear your thoughts. It expanded, I think, the word count by 20 or 30 words. So again, there's a lot of rearranging, but mostly the same. So now comes the first of our published author attempts. So my plan is to open a new Word document and actually type out a chapter of the book, so that way I can really get a sense of what it's like to write like them. I feel like when you're reading, it's a lot harder to get the feel of the actual writing, and to force myself to actually type it out might help. So the plan is, first I'm going to type out a section. I'll give you my summarized thoughts on how I think their writing style differs, and then I'll see about trying to implement those changes. This might be a fail. I really don't know how this is going to work, if this is even going to work, but we don't know unless we give it a shot. I think this is going to be a lot harder than I anticipated, because so far what I've been writing from this one, I started at chapter 2 since it had dialogue in it, but chapter 1 was mostly just like one person in an environment, so we didn't get like dialogue exchange, and because there's some in mine, I wanted to have that. But I feel like his writing style is really similar to my own, so I don't know how many changes I'm going to make. The main things that I can tell that are different from how Rice writes versus me is that his paragraphs, I think, go on for a little bit longer than mine, as well as what I think is really interesting is he writes out the thoughts of his character. So like dialogue, almost, but with italics instead of quotations. So that's something I could implement. I feel like there is an aspect to his writing that just feels like smooth, if that makes sense. Like it's smooth, and it almost feels not lethargic, but just like slow and like meaningful. Like, I feel like he takes his time building up to specific things that I would probably trim or cut, he spends a little bit more time on. So with those things in mind, I think we're going to give it a go. And he also does use a lot more senses that I've been using. So not just focused on like visual, but also maybe a bit more on like auditory and smell and those kinds of things. Okay, I think off the bat, just an easy thing is I'm going to put in one of the thoughts that he uses, and I want to put it in here. So when Beth debated, I'm going to put, okay, now I'm going to tackle trying to add more sensory details. Maybe when we talk about the woman, she could have an overpowering perfume. I feel like that's my go-to in a lot of stuff, and it's kind of lazy. Or maybe, you know, it's a new restaurant, so we can smell paint. Yeah. Okay. Use pine air fresheners covered up the last of the stench of new paint. But I think I lost a sentence where I mentioned it was a new restaurant. And then I feel like I could add more sound to this, the whale. Okay, what are the other scents? There's touch, feel. Oh, maybe I could, there's a temperature to the room that I could think about. The room suddenly too hot. Okay, I feel like this is as good as I could get it for this author. So we've just added the thought, and we have added some more sensory details. I feel like I don't have a very good grasp about what makes this author super different from my writing. So on to the next. I feel like if any of them are going to be different, it's going to be Gillian Flynn. Like, her writing style is very distinctive. To play the part of Gillian Flynn correctly, I decided that the first sentence should be a bit more provocative, because the starts of like a lot of her chapters, they have like this like snappy intro. Like, for example, I just opened chapter 6. Small towns usually cater to one kind of drinker. This one's Alan was wearing white pants, the creases like folded paper, and a pale green Oxford when I came down to breakfast. My mother was wearing blue to the funeral. So it's a bit more like impactful. So for this one, I actually opened a new document and just wrote another little beginning. I didn't want to go too crazy, because honestly, even writing this little section took me a while, just because I was fighting my own instincts a bit more. Beth played her part perfectly, yet the child did not stop staring. So just slightly different. And then I added more colors to the narrative, because I've noticed that Gillian Flynn uses a lot of colors when describing things. And so Beth's maroon pantsuit bore no stains or creases. And then also, Gillian Flynn has a tendency of stacking up verbs. So that's why I did hours of yanking and twisting had tamed her hair into an elegant coif. There should have been no hint of her year of hermitage. Yeah, so what imperfection had the child detected? And then this is like similar to what we've been doing. The child hid in his mother's shimmering purple skirt, bright colors, blonde curls, and then curious blue eyes. His mother paid him no mind. The waif-thin woman with glossy hair. That's what we did before. Beth shifted her attention to the floor-to-ceiling windows of the restaurant's front of house, kind of coming in again, establishing location. The newly opened establishment had been built high in the mountains so its clientele could look down on the twinkling city below. I think I actually really like this sentence. I might actually put that into my opening. It's just another way of being like, this is for prestigious people. And so, anyways, this is my attempt. This is actually a lot harder than I thought it was going to be, to try and mimic these people's writing. But we're not giving up. I've committed, so we are going to finish with Karen Slaughter. Are you ready for the third and final author? I know I am, because I'm honestly kind of exhausted and sick of looking at the same passage for so long. What I really like about this writing style is that the author does a really good job with the like showing versus telling balance of things, because she is able to discuss a lot of themes and ideas on the page without it sounding like just a monologue of stuff. So she uses more discrete examples to exemplify what she's trying to say, if that makes sense. For this start of my chapter 1, I decided to forego the child. The child will come in later, but we start a bit more general. I have the first sentence as, Beth didn't understand the need for so many windows when solid walls would do just as well. So in this case, instead of looking at the child, I'm going straight into the fact that she's in public for the first time. What is she noticing? And so the child will kind of come later. So as a new restaurant catering to the city's elite, they needed to impress, sure. But they could accomplish it through fancy artwork or interior decorating, not making their guests feel like a strong gust of wind would throw them down into the mountains. Beth tried to focus on the waif-thin woman complaining to the maitre d', tried not to study the nearby peaks for possible ascent routes, tried not to calculate the days and equipment required for the climb. So I have a little bit of repetition there with the tried not, because that was something I noticed in Karen Slaughter's writing, was kind of this repetition of similar words, as well as she doesn't necessarily write complete full sentences with a noun and then like a verb conjugated to that noun. Like she'll just kind of do these like fragments of sentences. So instead, she grounded herself in the claustrophobic front of house. She focused herself to listen to the tirade of the angry lady juxtaposed over slow jazz music. It appeared this one wasn't so easily impressed. A blonde head peered around the woman's shimmering purple dress, a little boy with rosy cheeks and tight curls. He stared at Beth, but when he noticed her attention, he yelped and ducked behind his mother's legs. A second later, he peeked out. And then from there, it would kind of take off where my passage would continue. But in my original chapter 1, I also did add a little section that was inspired by Karen Slaughter. I do think that I want to take her ability to write abstractly about things to heart for a lot of what's to come, because I really think that that's one of the things I struggle with, is I'll just be super blunt and be like, Beth was furious about the injustices of the world. But being able to kind of pull back the way Karen Slaughter does and really kind of piece together through thought, not so direct, but maybe give examples of it, is something I would want to work on for my own writing. The one little section that I put in based on Karen Slaughter was right here. So a small blonde head peeked past the woman's knee, tears gone from his face now that he accessed his mother's protection. Gone was the open curiosity too. Like mother, like son, they gawked at the girl who was different. So here again, using that repetition of gone and gone, but then as well, like they gawked at the girl who was different. So obviously that's Beth's perspective, is that they were gawking. So kind of trying to add that in, not as Beth felt like they were staring at her, you know? I feel like this experience has been a little bit of a mixed bag, where I feel like I really overestimated how hard it would be to copy someone else's writing, especially because at the end of the day, like, this is all thriller novels. Writing styles are pretty similar. There are slight quirks. I did get something out of each of these different authors' writing. So for Karen Slaughter, I really liked the repetition, fragmented sentences. I really liked the her intros to chapters and how she describes complex thoughts with these examples, basically. For Gillian Flynn, I really liked the sharpness of the writing. I know it's funny because it's sharp objects, but I really feel like she does not waste words. Like when she's writing, everything is super pointed, super direct to what she wants. And I also really like the originality of a lot of her descriptions. She says things that I've never heard before, but makes sense. Like when you hear it, you're like, oh yeah, like that's true. And then from Moon of the Crusted Snow, I really enjoyed kind of that like slower pace. Like even though it's a thriller, like taking your time to set up different scenes, as well as using all of the senses when trying to describe a scene. That is obviously something that I know I should do, but it's easy to forget. So I will say, I think this opening passage is pretty good. The only thing that I might remove that I've added from this experience was when Beth has her thought, just because I don't think that really fits in my writing style, but a lot of the other stuff I really like, and I want to keep these things in mind moving forward. So if you made it to the end of this video, thanks for hanging out with me this long. I really don't know what this is gonna look like all edited. Let me know if you have any opinions on this scene, and any thoughts of how to strengthen it, or any thoughts on how to improve line editing. Like, that's something that I'm still gonna probably try and continue doing, though I'm like really impatient to try and start line editing this book. Like, line editing can be really fun, even though it is my weakest point. Thank you for being here, and I will see you in the next video.